Here in the northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
In high school during career day, we had people from the medical field, finance department, probably some people from corporate America. But we never had anyone talk to us about fishing and how that passion could be a job. My next guest is Jesse Colten, owner of Xcalak in Xcalak, Mexico. We both graduated from the same high school, and we're both doing what we both love. So it's great to have him on the podcast and talk about his fishing and his fishy career. Thanks for joining me today, Jesse.
Hi, Lauren. I'm really excited. Thanks so much for having me. What a small world, huh?
Such a small world. And you know how we like to start this podcast? We always kick it off with a story. So if you have one that you can share, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. As you mentioned, Lauren, I am the owner of the Xcalak Lodge down in Xcalak, where we're primarily a permit fishery down there. That's what everybody loves to fish for. And being the lodge owner down there, you would think that I would, get a lot of opportunities to fish. And even though I do get some, I wouldn't say I get a ton. It's a lot of just like hearing about the bite all the time. So on one particular day, we do a Saturday to Saturday week there. So everybody comes in on Saturday and then they leave and the next room comes in the same day. But on one Saturday, we had a real late arrival. So myself and 3 of my guides there, it was like mid-season. And thank God we were super packed this year, but we were getting pretty burnt out, towards the end of March, early April. And so we decided, hey, we got the new boat, let's take it out. Everything's fishing great. All the clients are super happy. What's nice about Xcalak is it's a big fishery really. And it's such a small pressure there. It's really just a few boats out on the water every day. So we're like, yeah, let's go for it. And so one of my guides, Andres Castro, it was a really unfortunate, sad story, but his dad actually passed away from COVID, who was one of the first independent guides in Xcalak. His dad, his aunt, and both of his grandparents all in like a month this summer. It was
that's horrible.
I know, it was so sad, and he's such a sweet guy. So him, myself, and 2 other of our guides decided to go out. And Andres is like, I really want to fish with you, bud. Like, it's been so long. We'd been so busy with work, we hadn't had a chance to hang out. And so I was like, absolutely, but I'm pulling half the time and I want to see you catch a fish. And he's laughing. And so we go out into the bay. We're the only boat out there. It's about like a little 20-minute run from our lodge, sits right on the Caribbean, which we fish a lot on the front side there too. But today there was a little bit of wind, or that day rather. And so we went down into the cut, went into the bay, and right away, Andres is like, all right, you're up first, bud. Andres is pulling along and spots a school of tail and permit. And he, throws the anchor down real quick and hustles me out of the boat, and we walk over to him and we hustle him around a little bit, and eventually, boom, one goes tight. And we celebrate super hard because anytime, you get a permit to eat a fly, it's always a cause for celebration, in my opinion. And so we're landing the fish, and Andres is like really anxious to tail the fish. You could tell like he just wanted it. And the fish still had a lot of juice. It wasn't a huge fish. It was probably like in between a 10 and 15 pound fish, which they're sporty. And so he's trying to tail the fish. Eventually, like early in my opinion, like wham, snatches down, tails the fish. We're all super happy. And all 4 of us are in the water together and we're celebrating, and he hands me the fish. Immediately I drop it. It just like slips out of my hands, and the fish had so much energy, it ran around all 4 of us and took my Helios 3 into about 6 pieces, just wham, 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 wham. Shattered the rod, and we hand lined the fish back in, essentially like with the fly line, because the fly was still in the mouth, which was, it was sort of bittersweet. But we ended up taking pictures of the fish and we let it go, and we were celebrating, and we're walking back to the boat. So we're walking back to the boat and we're just celebrating, we're talking about Andres' dad, and we're just talking about how lucky we are to live in this just paradise. And right then, boom, there's another school of fish, tailing. Super sunny, beautiful Clearwater day. And I just we run up to the boat because my rod's broken. We re-rig one of our tarpon rods. We have 2 rods left now in the boat because we broke one.
Gosh.
And I stuffed one of the rods in actually not Andres' hand, it was Eric's hand, another one of our guides. He was next. So I stuffed it in Eric's hand. He ran up there, and me and Andres walked back to the boat to rig up the other rod. And all of a sudden we hear Eric and Giovanni, the other guy with us, just yell. We look over and Eric's bent on, and fish is on, running super far, and they're celebrating. And we're like, wow, hook 2 permit inside of a half hour. Like, this is crazy. And so as they're fighting that fish, I'm rigging the rod, I think, and Andres is like, oh, yesy, points out, and there's another school of fish over there. And we just couldn't believe it. Andres runs over. I go over with Eric to help him tail his fish, and I sort of forget Andres is out there fishing. And right before I tail Eric's fish, we just hear Andres scream from across the bay. He was probably about 150 yards, 200 yards away from us at that point. He had been sort of hunting, stalking these fish, and we look over, and sure enough, he's running a permit out, to the horizon, and it was amazing. We all just were dying laughing.
Oh
and
my gosh.
This laughter took over our bodies for some reason. I tail Eric's fish, and I'm handing it to him, and I'm like, great, I'm going to go over and help Andres. And as I do that, I'm walking over to Andres, and I sort of all of a sudden kind of hear some commotion behind me, and I see Eric take the fly out of the fish's mouth and give the rod to Giovanni, because there was that same school of fish that Eric had hooked one out had circled back around. So as I run over, I'm like, geez, I tell Eric, I'm like, wait with your fish. What's nice about permit, as long as you keep them in the water, they're super just durable, awesome fish. They're so hard to catch, but once you put your hand on that tail, except for the one that broke my rod, they tend to really be fine spending some time with you if you handle them well. So I told Eric, I was like, hold the fish. It'd be great to get a picture of you and Andres and remember this day. And so I run over to Andres, and his fish, Andres's, was the biggest. And it was just a really sporty land. He's running around this log. I'm trying to tail this fish. It goes on for a little while. And same scenario, just before I tail that fish, from way across the bay, we hear Giovanni, who we call Kisi. He's this tiny little Mayan guy. He can't be over, 4 feet tall. He's up to his neck in water. But I see his rod. All I see is his rod just bending and him just yelling. And we had that 3rd fish on, technically the 4th on of the day. And so I land Andres' fish. I'm getting a good workout because I'm moving all across if you ever walked in a white sand bay, it's a little bit of work to walk through those flats. And I run over to Kisi, and we eventually tail Kisi's fish, and we get to take a picture of those guys with the triple up, in a video that I took, I'll never forget, where they release all their fish together, and all of them are just jumping, splashing in the water, going crazy. And it was just that moment for me as a lodge owner to just soak everything in, to enjoy these guys that are working hard, busting their asses. For me, after having such a tough year with COVID, now it just was that moment of we're back, life is back. And I think we could have caught more fish that day. It was probably 11 o'clock at that point, and we just went home. And we had dinner and drank beers and just talked about it, and I think we'll always remember that day together, the 4 of us.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It seems that kind of life has been taken away, and you're like, what are we doing? And especially when people lose loved ones due to COVID, and then to have a magical moment like that kind of brings you back to why you are here and why you are doing what you are doing. Kind of going back with what we're saying, with what we were talking about earlier about, how we both kind of grew up in a place where fly fishing wasn't really talked about. No one was like, hey, Jesse, go grab your fly rod this weekend. Let's go hang out and go fishing. I'm curious about your journey on how you, especially going from Colorado and then being an owner in Xcalak.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Even though, being in sort of a fishy state, it wasn't a talked about common sport. It certainly wasn't cool. In junior high, there was a couple teachers, Mr. Milliron and Mr. Babcock, that had started a little fly tying club that just taught us to tie these little flies. And my best friend, Chad Sperry, who still is my best friend to this day, and we guided for a lot of years together, got me into it. And that was in junior high. And I kind of like quickly picked it up and put it down. And just like, through high school, I was sort of just like focused on sports or whatever, and not fishing. And then right after high school, I kind of gave college an effort, and I think I could have given it a better effort. I think if I were to go back today, I'd probably be more successful. But I was sort of just like indulging in the fun parts of college and not really putting anybody's money to good use at that point. And so Chad and I talked after our freshman year, and we both moved back to Vail. And we wanted to be fly fishing guides. That's what we wanted to do. And so we just fished like crazy, skied like crazy. And by the summer of 2011, summer of 2012, we started guiding. And then that was really, I think, that moment where I went from like having jobs to having a job that I felt like was something totally different, where it wasn't just me trying to get this paycheck. It was like me doing something where like I was like, whoa, I sort of feel like I'm good at this, and I sort of feel like I'm able to connect with these people, whether the fishing's good, whether the fishing's bad. And I remember I saved up money to spend $800 on this oar certification. In the state of Colorado, not like in Montana, you need a oar cert to be a commercial float guide for fly fishing. So the same oar cert that like a rafting guide would need. And I saved up money for that, and I got it. And I think that $800 of education, to see what's grown from that has just been crazy, So that was big for me to, as opposed to spending, this amount of money on college. It was $800 that took for me to basically start a career that has brought me, 10 years down the road, has brought me to some amazing places. So, so then I, guided for years and years, and eventually some older guide mentors were like, you got to get into salt. You got to get into salt, Eventually, one of the places we went on that journey was Xcalak. And I just fell in love head over heels, like you do with a place sometimes.
What made you fall in love with it?
I mean, I became very permit obsessed very quick. Once you see them in the water, it's hard not to. But I think that was sort of like the surface level. I would call the permit thing sort of the infatuation. And then the deep love was sort of just this community and this, I just didn't realize a place like this still existed. I mean, it is literally just dropped right on top of paradise, the Caribbean, the Mesoamerican Reef, Chetumal Bay. And then with all that there's still just this tiny little undeveloped village of like 350 people. And it's super safe, and it's super just welcoming, and everybody is just like happy. Like I would say that, people don't have a ton down there, but compared to the States, it feels like everybody has enough. One of the culture shock things that happens to me when I get home to the States is, flying to Denver and just see the amount of homelessness there.
Yeah,
is pretty shocking at times. And to not really have that in this third world developing little town is interesting to me. But no, really, that's a side note. But really, I just kind of fell in love with the whole culture, vibe, food, and definitely the humans. That was the big one.
Well, and when you went there, you didn't even know the language. You didn't speak Spanish, correct?
Yeah, correct. I never took Spanish in school. I wish I had of. All the pretty girls I remember were in Spanish class, and I was in German. I don't know what I was doing with that, but I always felt like one of the educational muscles I could sort of flex growing up was language. I did do fairly well in German, and my mom spoke fluent German, and that was like her career as a young woman. And so
so you were taking German in high school,
right?
Oh, okay,
correct, yeah. And so I mean, but I liked language. I always remember being like, wow, I enjoy this, as far as, in terms of like science and math was just getting like hit over the head with a book, but so yeah, I didn't have any Spanish skills really, like a little bit, like some kitchen Spanish from working in restaurants, but and down in Xcalak, it is like virtually no English. There's a handful of people in town, maybe.
So how long did it take you to pick up the language?
Oh, it's language. Spanish is like fishing, like surfing, like anything. It's not even close to mastered. It's something I'm working on every single day. And I've been doing that for 3 years. And I think after the first year, the funniest part was like, I have all, a bunch of employees and friends and people that work for me and work with me. And it was like after a year that I think they really started to like learn my personality, which was bizarre. Like I had all these friends and they must have just thought I was like the most boring dude alive. But as soon as I started to like land a couple jokes here and there, or like just be cheeky or just like whatever, be sarcastic. Because, Mexican people, maybe Lauren, are like the most playful people ever.
Yeah.
Like there's rarely a serious minute, and like I have to force seriousness into our guide meetings and into our staff meetings and stuff like that, because they're just so playful and fun all the time. Like bad attitudes are just not tolerated down there. And so for me, it was just a huge thing that I needed to be able to participate in that. I needed to be able to be there as a human being, and not just like think the other experiences they've had down there and similar to other places. There's a lot of business owners that come from the States and sort of just kind of juice the lemon, so to speak, a little bit. And some of them give back and some of them don't and what have you. But I definitely wanted to be an owner and a person that was a part of the community and someone that, people knew and felt comfortable joking with, and kind of not just back and forth when there was money to be made or not,
Yeah, absolutely.
And now a brief message from our sponsors. Introducing the Triced All-Fly Kit, Composite Development's latest game-changing innovation. Utilizing the same butt section, the All-Fly morphs from 5-weight to an 8-weight via interchangeable sections. Need a little more length? Pop the extender into place and the 9-foot rod becomes a 10-footer. All housed within an ingenious tri-folding magnet rod tube, the All-Fly is the most versatile fly fishing tool ever devised, negating the need for multiple rods. Switch from delicate presentations with tiny parachutes to hucking gaudy cone heads. This package must be seen to be believed. Go to cd-fishing.us, click the video tab, and see the Triced All-Fly in action. And remember to go fishing.
I imagine, though, going from Vail and kind of doing that type of fishing, mountain streams, and then going to saltwater, that's a huge transition. What did you feel was like the hardest? I mean, other than the language barriers, which I would find that to be very difficult. I guess fishing wise, what did you have to change your mentality when transferring from the mountain rivers to saltwater?
That's a great question. And I think, most of the time when I've been asked that question, I used to say the casting, the vision muscle of being able to see really well and cast really well. But really, I think as I step back now and examine my freshwater fishing career versus my salt, the biggest difference between those two for me 100% is the ability to understand the food source. So like fly fishing in freshwater, mountain streams, rivers, the food source is often right in front of you. I mean, you can pick your fly based on the hatch that's hitting you in the face, right? Or you can turn over rocks and be like, midge, stonefly, blue wing, here we go, And it's a little bit easier for me in a freshwater experience to decipher what that food source is. Where the bugs in saltwater, the sea insects are shrimp, crab, baby lobster. They don't hatch out of the water. They're extremely hard to find. I'll go snorkeling, looking for them everywhere, trying to understand what it is that these permit want to eat at different times, because their food does change. I mean, I think overall, most people kind of tend to believe that here's our batch of permit flies and they're just going to eat one of them, and this is the year-round thing, we'll throw all of them. But I've watched these permit change over seasons about what they want to eat. And that, dissecting and getting into what the permit wants to eat is really the only way to go about catching them, other than working on your casting skills and that kind of stuff,
Well, that'll make my husband really happy to hear, because he's been trying to catch a permit every time he goes out there, and he's probably caught like a really tiny one, but he is having the hardest time. So he's always like, I try and throw them everything, crab patterns and and it's in like the fact that we started this story with that crazy success story about catching permit. They are such hard fish because their mouths are so tiny. What makes you decide that permit is kind of your go-to fish? Like, what do you love about them?
Yeah, I mean, they're total unicorns, right? And that story that we told at the beginning just horribly skews what permit fishing is all about. The only reason we were able to enjoy that so much is all of the pain and hours and desperation and insecurity and all that stuff that goes into permit fishing, because they're so hard to catch and so hard to trick and so hard to feed. And then when you do feed them, they're easy to miss. So yeah, for your husband, like there's no shame in all about not catching permit. And like I always tell people that, they come to Xcalak after seeing all these photos of all these fish, and what those photos don't say is, how much pain and time and sweat and luck there was into that event happening. Because at the end of the day, the fish still has to choose to eat the fly. And so that you can do everything right in the world with permit. You can pick the right fly, you can make the right cast, you can have the right boat set up, you can do everything perfect, and it still probably won't happen. And that's what people hate about it, and that's what I just adore about it, to be honest. I need that fish to torture me.
Just like how we kind of like life, right? If it was too easy,
Exactly.
we'd try and find something else that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. I was just about to say, because I think a lot of people have expectations if you're going with any guide that, hey, I'm paying you money, so my expectations is that you're going to have me catch some fish. And that's just because you pay someone to take you fishing doesn't mean that's going to be 100% guaranteed that you're going to catch a fish. How do you get those expectations for guests coming up? Like, hey, just want to let you know, like the chances of you actually catching a permit are pretty low. Or like, how do you set those expectations?
That's such a great question, because I think more than anything, that is my job. People always ask me like, "Oh, so you're guiding down there?" No, I'm not guiding. Like all of our guides are from Xcalak, nowhere else. We
Yeah.
do everything we can just to support the economy of that town. My job down there is a expectation manager. That should be on my business card. I mean, that's literally what I do. And it starts with, the reservation process. So like when people call me up, or when they call Yellow Dog or one of the agents that book us, like I always sort of try to reassure the fact that like you're only buying the opportunity to potentially have good weather, to potentially find these fish, to try to catch them. Xcalak does have an extremely high turnover rate. Like we didn't have a single week this year that we did not put our hands on a permit, which was crazy.
Wow.
And that was not my experience the first 2 years there. Something changed. Perhaps it was the pandemic, perhaps it was this, but even as this streak was going on, through bad weather, through everything, I would always remind our guests, like, if we catch one permit this week, we're going to celebrate it. If we don't, we're going to just enjoy the opportunity at fish. That's how I mark the success of any week is opportunity, not in, actually putting our hands on these permits.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the hardest thing about being anyone in a position where you're taking people fishing is that sometimes their expectations are a lot higher, and then there's so many other elements that are against you, like you said, weather and are the fish eating, what hatch is going on, and also like maybe they don't want to eat whatever you're throwing, like maybe they're over it.
Oh, they're so moody. Like I love them, but they are just the moodiest creatures ever. And when they're in the mood to eat, it's great, and when they're not, it's pretty painful. Because one thing about Xcalak is you can talk to other people that have been there, because obviously my opinion is biased, but there's tons of permit there. If you have good weather, you are going to be in front of permit casting at them. That much I do guarantee. There is the occasional like random spawn where they disappear off the flats and it's beautiful weather and you're like, what happened? But 99% of the time when we have good weather in Xcalak, you're casting at permit. That's just the way it is there. But how their mood's going to be. People want to know, they're so obsessed with the moon phase, or they're obsessed with the
Yeah.
tide, or with this. And those are factors, but the number one factor by far is weather. That's the factor. I keep a permit journal, and which for a long time didn't have much in it. Because really the only things you can learn from permit fishing are the successes. When you have a failure, there's lessons to be learned there. But a lot of the failures, as you start to get good at it, you don't have a reason for why they didn't eat the fly. Maybe it
Yeah.
was the fly. Maybe it was your leader construction. Maybe they saw the shadow of the boat. Maybe they just got in a fight with their buddy and they don't feel like eating right now. I have no, you know what I mean? So all you can really learn from are the successes. And the successes are just when you feed a fish, whether it breaks off, whether it spits, whether you miss the eat, whatever. When you feed a fish, you did something right. And so I always document it down. And I write down like the weather pattern that day and the temperature and whether I was on the ocean or the bay or all that stuff. And the only really consistency that there is, 90% of the feeds I've had come when you have light, it's sight fishing. You need to be able to see them.
I absolutely love that you're keeping a journal. I think that's just such a smart way to do it because that way you can kind of keep consistent and also to see how weather and climate and everything is changing and how that's affecting your business. I think that's such a brilliant move.
Yeah.
I know we're talking right now. You're actually back in our hometown, Colorado Springs, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, Lauren, I was in Colorado Springs yesterday, seeing my folks for the first time since before the pandemic. And I actually drove back up to Vail last night. So I'm back in Vail.
Oh my gosh, did it feel so good to see them?
It was crazy. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I hadn't hugged my parents in, since like 6 months before the pandemic started. So it was like, late 2019, the last time I gave them a hug.
Isn't that crazy? And especially probably after having been in Xcalak, where it seems like a lot of people who were lost during COVID, it must have felt really good to probably get your arms around them and just being like, oh, how grateful you kind of get into those situations when they've been taken away from you for so long too.
Without a doubt. I mean, that was the ultimate silver lining of COVID for me, right? Is
Yeah.
like I was always kind of that one in the family that was like hard to get to the family vacation. I was late to Christmas. I was late to Thanksgiving. I couldn't make it. I was here, I was there. And now I'm just like in a group texting my family, like, when are we getting together? Like, when are we going back to South Carolina? Like, I just like missed everybody so much. I know usually you only get that level of understanding after losing somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and COVID definitely gave myself and my family that same feeling of like, oh no, we don't get to be together. And now we still have everybody. So, and you don't know how long it's going to stay that way. And so
Yeah.
we're just enjoying, like I went out and played golf with my dad. I hadn't done that forever. Just watch movies and laugh with my mom. We just had a blast. It was so great to be home.
Oh gosh, I love it. So tell me, like, what is your schedule? Are you just here on vacation, or is there a season where you kind of go back and forth?
So I'm in the off season right now for the X Flats, and this is usually when I come home and guide. For the first time in 9 years, I'm actually not guiding this summer.
Wow, good for you. You deserve it.
Yeah, it's bittersweet for sure because I have a ton of clients that are kind of peeved at me, but they're going in great hands with other great guides here. But no, it's I'm just here, basically off and on. I've got some travel with Bahio, I've got some travel with the X Flats, but really I'm here off and on until early October.
Yeah, because Bahio is also are you an ambassador for the sunglass company?
Yeah, so I am an ambassador. I'm part of this team that Bahio put together called the Odyssey team, which is two guys and two girls, and they are taking us around, and we're basically investigating all the different flats around the world. So Bahio in
What?
Spanish means, yeah, it's really super cool. It's the brainchild of the CEO and founder of Bahio, Al Perkinson, and Bahio means the shallows. And so this company is just purely based around the flats. That's really their whole focus about, and preserving, conserving, and understanding all these flats and the locations and the communities that live there. So we're visiting Cuba in October, which will be great.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible company. So, what are you going to be doing in Cuba?
I actually don't know the storyline yet with Cuba. So they're putting it together now. I believe the rumors I'm hearing is that we're doing some sort of woody wagon, station wagon road trip through up the coast of Cuba and fishing along the way, and just diving in, trying to understand the local people and the guides there. They haven't released any of the footage yet, but we did Honduras, Guanaja, the little island of Guanaja, in April, which was amazing, and what a beautiful island and beautiful people that live there.
And were you targeting any fish over there?
Yeah, so it was permit. It was the same flat species we have in Xcalak. It was permit, tarpon, bonefish. I caught my first Honduran permit, which was sweet. And the focus there is they had a real bad hurricane there a number of years ago. I think Mitch, that essentially ripped out something like 80% of their mangrove life. And for those of you guys that don't know, like mangroves are the nursery for these flat species fish. So like when permit, bonefish, tarpon are too small to evade predators, they live in the roots of the mangroves that of course, grow into the water and then and the ground underneath the water. So they use that. It's crucial for the growth of these species.
Wow, how cool. I mean, also, I mean, the fact that you're kind of being able to explore all these different places, also a learning moment to understand like how much the ecosystem is so fragile and how that one small change can just be a ripple effect for other problems. So when will you be going back to X-Flats then? So you're doing this Odyssey adventure for how many months?
So the Odyssey thing is actually quarterly. So we go on a
Okay.
trip every 3 months. And so the next one is not, we had to push it back a little bit because one of our guys had a scheduling thing. But so the next one's in October. We have a couple other Bahio small things this summer. I'm headed to Jackson Hole to shoot with some of the Howler guys this week. And then I go back to Xcalak on August 1st for the Silver Scales permit tournament down there.
And what is that?
Yeah, it's a fishing tournament, kind of like the March Merkin or the Del Brown. It's after the Del Brown, and all the guys, like, it's a lot of Belizean guys, it's a lot of Florida guys, some Mexico guys, just all get together, and we send a bunch of boats out on the water, and we all try to hustle these permit around and try to catch some of them. And it's the Grand Slam species, so it's tarpon, permit, bonefish. They all have different associated points. I'll for sure get my butt whooped, but we're going to go have some fun.
Well, do you get to, is it kind of like the Bass Pro? Do you guys get some t-shirts that you have to wear and have all the ambassadors on it? Is it going to be kind of like that?
It is. Yeah, it's we're hosting a big night at the Expo. It's a big dinner. We're one of the sponsors. Bahio's a sponsor. There's something like 40 or 50 sponsors for the tournament. Huge turnout this year. They've been doing it a long time. The organizers of the tournament are great guys, Mexican guys. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to being back. My fishing partner is one of my favorite people ever, Paco American, who's the owner of Fly Fishing Tabasco, which is a baby tarpon fishery in Mexico. And if we've got any shot in hell, it's on Paco's shoulders. You can
I like to just put it on somebody else's shoulders as well. Like if we're not doing well on fishing, I'll be like, Justin, it's totally your fault. I mean, it's not me. It has everything to do with you.
Oh, absolutely. I totally blamed my buddy Chad Sperry for not podiuming him at the GoPro games, but he fished a lot better than me, so he knows it was on my shoulders.
Yeah, let's talk about the GoPro games. What exactly was that?
The GoPro games is an awesome event. I came back early just to see all my friends really that were going to be here. It used to be the Teva Mountain Games for years that took place in Vail, and then GoPro took over the games, I want to say like in 13 or 14, and immediately added fishing to it. So there's a casting competition that leads to an eventual fishing competition. And then a few years ago, Rick Mesmer came up with this beautiful idea where he did this thing that Yeti sponsors called Yeti Catch Wars. And there's 10 boats that all have to be really, really whitewater savvy. And it's 2-man teams. And you row a section of the Upper Eagle, which is, our prized freestone here in the Vail Valley. And the Eagle is sporty and rocky and rough. It's raft only. And it's high water basically, or just under high water. And so it's a 6-mile beat is the Catch Wars. It's a 2-man team. So you row that beat, you have to do it in 2 hours, which is a push to fish to do 2 hours, 6 miles. And then you switch and the other person rows and then you fish. And you count up your fish and you get to measure 3 per round. And it's just this blast of a whitewater, cold wave, streamer throwing, little one-day fishing tournament. It's so much fun.
How did you do?
We got 4th. We were like, I literally came in off the plane on a Wednesday night and the tournament was Thursday morning. And so Sperry, my best friend and compadre, had scouted the river a bit and, did his best job. I think we were outmatched in the fishiness as far as like guys had their finger on the pulse. Our guiding mentors, we call him Dad, but his name's Ryan Schmidt, and our other buddy D-Bus got 3rd just above us. We were 2 fish behind them. And then some other really good friends took 1st. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. So now what's on your bucket list? Like, do you have any other new adventures that you're like, okay, I want to come? Maybe it's coming to Missoula, even though it doesn't sound as exciting. But yeah, what is your next bucket list of things to do?
This is going to sound crazy, Lauren, but I have never really fished in Montana.
There's a problem there.
I know, huge problem. And I've met like literally probably 80% of our lodge guests this year are Montana folks. So I've got to do like a big loop and see everybody and fish. And I think I might be planning a Montana trip at the end of August, maybe. when all of my guide buddies are super salty and ready to take a break. So I'd love to come through and see you guys in Missoula. That would be great.
Absolutely. We'll show you around the waters. Except right now, Justin's really into pike fishing, which actually, if you're really into permit, you might really like pike fishing because it's a really all sightseeing. So it's really fun.
I have a total huge interest in pike. I just keep hearing about this bite from, like I'm a love snook fishing because it's my favorite bite in the game. And I keep hearing friends being like, oh, you need to pike fish. You got to pike fish, like the bite. And I know it's kind of one of those things too, where it's like you're putting in a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that's become my favorite way to fish. Trout is, my home, my lighthouse, my beacon. I'll always love trout fishing, but I definitely would love to go struggle on some pike waters and hopefully feel that bite at some point.
Well, we can do it both. We can do it all here. So Jesse, what is one of your favorite, or, I always like to say, what is your favorite fly? And I guess it's like, it doesn't even have to be that most successful one, but like, which one is kind of like your lucky fly that you like to use?
We call it the Venom, but it's really a raghead. And it's the brainchild of a bunch of people in the Yucatan and mostly up in Punta Allen. A good friend of mine, Patrick, ties it really well and taught me how to tie it. It's about the size of, and profile of like your ring fingernail or your pinky nail. It's a small fly. I think a lot of people, depending on where you are, you throw a lot of big flies. Like in Honduras, we were throwing these huge flies with these permit. In Mexico, in Xcalak, we throw these small little crabs with dumbbell eyes that sink quick and don't make a big splash. And that's definitely my favorite fly. It's a fun fly to tie, and it's an easy fly to cast. And every now and then they bite it.
That's good. I mean, that's all you really need. I always, my biggest fly that I love are just anything with Flashabou. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just love a good old Flashabou. Like Justin will give me a fly and he's like, this is going to be a good one. I'm like, ugh, it's just black and I can't really see anything. Like, don't you think we need to put a little Flashabou in there? So like when the sun hits.
Flashabou is so fun to say too.
It is. It's like the best word ever. If I ever had, which I'm never going to have any more children, but I would probably name my kid Flashabou. I'd nickname him Flashabou because it is such a fun name.
It's funny to be like that with the material. I'm like that with Ice Pearl Dub. Like every single one of my flies always has it on there, and I should probably start tying a few without it. But you get addicted to our little like idiosyncrasies of how we like to tie,
Yeah, it is. It's an art, and I love it. I'm trying to get a little bit better at it, but also the vice seems to be pretty busy with the hands of my husband. So before I love to hear just one more fishing story from you, Jesse.
Yeah, it's so funny because I couldn't think of one leading up to it. And then it's so funny we were just talking about tying flies because this really awesome story happened at the lodge a couple weeks before I left, and you just made me think of it.
The beauty of talking.
The beauty of just rambling. So these guys were down at the lodge. A group from Yellow Dog, actually the president of Yellow Dog, Jim Klug, came down with I think 10 of his good buddies. And they were just all really good guys. And, I think with this story, it goes into this conversation of like, for the most part, people that permit fish and travel to fish are relatively wealthy. And that's unfortunate that it's that narrowed down. And I think there's opportunity to change that, but that ties into this story a little bit. So these guys were down, and they're really, really great guys. They've been successful in a bunch of different worlds of business. And a couple of the original investors of Howler Brothers were there, and just some great guys. And some of them were experienced and some of them weren't too. And we're tying flies the first night. And one of the guys who I just got such a kick out of was like, oh, I've never tied a fly, of any kind ever. And he's sort of watching me do it. And very quickly, the leader of the group, Eric Yonke, comes up with this idea. He goes, Chris, go tie a fly right now. And if you catch a fish on that fly, I'll donate, $5,000 to your favorite charity.
Wow.
And they all started looking around. And very quickly, it went from, I think, $5,000 to something like $35,000 or $40,000. I can't remember the exact number.
Oh my gosh.
They were but I was not allowed to help. I was allowed to give him 3 verbal instructions about what to do, but I wasn't allowed to touch the vise. I wasn't allowed to touch any material. And I came up with the idea. I was like, all right, you're going to tie shrimp. It's all about just, if you can get legs on this fly, and eventually morphed into where it didn't just have to be a snapper. It had to be a bonefish, which is, bonefish you do everything right, they'll eat it. But you got to do everything right, and the fly has to look like something that's alive. And so he slaps this fly together. There's glue everywhere. There was all sorts of shit. Like, it just was a disaster. But bless his soul, he figured out how to put those legs on and glue them on and do the whole thing. The fly just looked like water trash. It was just terrible. But he then committed his portion of the trip to being like, all right, my goal now is to, get Wounded Warriors 40 grand. It's not to catch a permit.
Wow.
And he did it. He took that fly out. The guide, Julio, I remember we showed him the fly on the dock, and Julio was like, we're not fishing that, basically. And I had to explain to Julio how important this was. And very quickly, I love our guides. Their Mexican guides are all about hospitality. They're not about, their own machismo and getting their guests. So it's great. But Julio totally dove in with them. They went out, him and Jim, with Julio that day, and they caught a bonefish on that fly. And I mean, we caught a lot of permit that week, but I think the biggest celebration we had at the Palapa was for that bonefish he caught on that fly, and then for those guys to donate all that money to Wounded Warriors, which is just an amazing project, was one of my favorite moments as a lodge owner to date, for sure.
Oh my gosh. I mean, was it Project Healing Waters? Is that the one that you did, or Wounded Warrior?
Man, I'd have to check with Eric, but I'm pretty sure it was Wounded Warriors.
Oh,
project.
okay. I was just curious. I wonder if they all of a sudden they just woke up, in the morning, and the receptionist was checking the accounts and was just like, holy smokes, what happened in one night? Because I wonder if they just dropped it.
Absolutely. And so funny. Of course, after he catches the fish, Eric whispers into my ear, like, hey, buddy, we were donating it regardless, where I thought all these stakes were on the line. But as soon as they come up with an idea, this is a great group of just really generous, thoughtful people. And as soon as they come up with an idea for charity, they're always really, really generous with helping. But that was just such a fun moment and a cool story, I think.
Well, and also what a great way to kind of keep the eye on the prize, so to say. I mean, for the entire trip, you're like, okay, what are we going to do out there? Because sometimes you're like, we're going to try and catch a permit, which is really hard, but to have the stakes that high too is super fun. I mean, even though they were going to donate it anyways, it's always kind of fun to have a fun game like that.
Absolutely.
So Jesse, if people are wanting to start booking their trips, what dates are available and how do they do that?
Yeah. So dates that are available, you can book us at the xflats.com, THEXFLATS.com. You can book me. You can book on Instagram. Honestly, we do a lot of bookings on Instagram at @the_xflats. However, as of a couple days ago, our spring is completely full. So February 1 through about towards the end of May is pretty full up. The end of May and early June has some room. And kind of one of the misconceptions, in my opinion, of the permit world is that they think that spring is the best time. Spring is a great time to permit fish for sure. You can bet on good weather there, but some of the best permit fishing I've ever seen is in the fall, in the early winter, we have north fronts, and then the summertime, holy smokes, the big tarpon show up and the permit fishing is great. So even though we're full for next spring for the most part, for 2023, we're taking some bookings for the spring already, and also our fall has some room, our early winter has some room, and next summer as well.
Which actually, I mean, that's the time where I'd want to go in winter. I mean,
yeah.
By the time in Missoula, I'm like, I need some vitamin D. I don't even care if it's not even that hot out there. I just want to be on a beach.
Oh, straight. I'm totally with you. And that December permit fishing can be awesome. It can be so good. The water slicks out. The wind's a lot lower in the winter than in the spring. The spring's warmer and you can bet on sun a little bit better, but the wind's up a lot. And, depending on skill level, some people, don't like the wind. I think the wind tends to help if you can use it right. But we tend to get calmer weather in those winter months sometimes, which is a lot of fun.
You should sign me up, because then I'll send both me. I'll take Justin out there. I'll bring Meredith and my other sister and her husband, and we'll make it a big family affair. That'd be super fun. Let's do it, and let's make it happen.
Tell Justin I will tie him my personal flies. I'll be with him on the boat. We'll make it happen. I never guarantee permit, but we will make it happen. And you'll probably beat him to the punch.
Actually, I was gonna say I feel like it's because my energy. I'm just like, okay, let's fish. But I have to say, if someone was screaming at me and it was strip. I'm like, oh, please don't yell at me. Like,
Yeah.
I promise I'm trying. But no,
I
that's
always talk with our guides about being calm, but it's so tough.
it's so hard. Like, I mean, even Justin does it to me. I'm like, just calm down, Justin. I'm going to bring it to the boat. But, and also maybe Jesse, we just need to contact our old high school and be like, hey, it's when is career day? We're going to come out there and talk about fishing, because maybe that would have changed. Well, I mean, we are where we are no matter what,
Yeah.
but maybe it changed somebody else's idea of like what it means to graduate.
I don't know if I invite a lot of college dropouts to career days, but if you start doing that, I'd definitely show up.
I think you're doing pretty amazing with the way that life has turned out for you, Jesse. And I can't thank you enough for joining me today. And let's be in touch for when you come to Missoula.
Absolutely, Lauren. Congratulations, you and Justin. What a great podcast. I'll be listening for a long time. And it was just a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.